Hello and welcome to our tour of Philippi. About 2 years ago, when Sherry and I were celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary, we had a chance to go to Greece, and we enjoyed that lovely country with its beautiful sights and the warmth of the people there. It was a great time. And one of the places we went to was Philippi. As you can see from this map, Greece is a large country that goes all the way down from the islands all the way up to the northern part. We mainly spent most of our time in the southern part of Greece, Athens, and in the place that looks like a hand called the Peloponnese. Athens was our hub, and so we traveled various places from there. We made our way to Athens, and then we took a plane all the way up north to Thessaloniki. And by the way, that's where Mary is from. And from Thessaloniki, we traveled all the way over by bus to Kavala, which is mentioned in this passage from Acts and called Neapolis. It was the port city for Philippi. So boats coming in bound for Philippi would port at Kavala and then make their way north, as we did by bus. So we hopped on a bus at Kavala and made our way up to Philippi. Luke describes Philippi in this way. And from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. An important point that he's making here, because it was a Roman colony, which meant that there was a strong Roman influence here, as can be seen by some of the inscriptions that I'll show later. This is a map of the city, the ancient ruins that we went to. And so we entered around number 15, which is the theater, and made our way all the way through the ruins. And you'll see by this map that the places are numbered, and you can come back to this if you want to see the various places. But I'll take you on beyond the map to show you the places themselves. This is actually a picture of the map on site that looks a lot like the map I just showed you. And there you can see the Greek names for the various places and the English next to it and the numbered places, and that's really what it looks like. So our first stop was the ancient theater. The ancient theater was the place, of course, where plays were put on, but there were also places where public meetings were held. If the city needed to reach a decision about something, they gathered there. They're also a place where, I suppose, philosophers would come and speak. The theater and the size of the theater gives us a good idea of how many people lived in that city. So you can gain an idea that Philippi was pretty big and pretty important because its theater is pretty large. Here's another picture of the theater, and there's Sherry taking a picture. And that little archway was a little entrance point to the side of the theater where the actors would come and come on stage and as part of the plays. Moving from the theater, we see the ruins of a church, and this is called Basilica A. And you can see some of the pillars and some of the walls of this ancient church, which was from the 5th century. So Philippi became a very important place for early Christianity, and we can see that in the fact that there are 4 major ruins of ancient churches on the site that are still preserved and still there. This next slide is the place where they think Paul was put in prison, and we read about this in this chapter in Acts chapter 16, that there was a bit of a kerfuffle in Philippi people didn't like what Paul was doing or the message he was preaching, so they placed Paul and his companions into prison. And of course we read the dramatic story of his jailbreak. So there's a picture, and there in the Greek you can see the prison of St. Paul, Phulake, that's what prison means in Greek. And here's another picture of what it looks down and below. So deep in the ground, we can see carved into this kind of cave-like structure is where they think Paul was put in prison. The next slide is a place called the Agora. And if you look very carefully at the slide of the Agora, you can see stone walls that are creating kind of little, almost little booths, separate booths for each area. And that's how the Agora worked. The Agora was the place where people would put up shops and they would practice their trade. So these are like little stores in the Agora. And Agora is the Greek word for the marketplace. This next slide is the Via Egnatia. The Via Egnatia was the major Roman road that linked the eastern part of the empire with the western part of the empire. I talk a lot about the Via Egnatia when I speak about New Testament times to my students, but I never dreamed I'd actually stand on the Via Egnatia. And there's a picture of Sherry and I standing on this ancient road which stretched from the eastern part of the empire all the way over to the western part of the empire. In fact, I had a student once who grew up in Albania, which, if you go back to that initial map, is in the west, but just north of Greece. And he said, oh yeah, the Via Egnatia was right outside my door. So he knew about the Via Egnatia when I was talking about it. So there it is. And that's the road that Paul presumably walked on as he went from place to place, traveling and bringing the gospel to people. The next picture is the Forum. Now, the Forum was the place for public buildings. So the Agora was the marketplace. The Forum was the place where you had public buildings, official government buildings, and you can see these lovely pillars that I just love this picture of the pillars in a row here, again showing that these buildings were important. This next slide is a Latin inscription, and if you look very carefully you can see Macedonia on the inscription. And it's important because it shows us the Roman influence in this city of Philippi. It shows us that it was indeed a Roman colony. Off in the distance you can see a picture of what's called Basilica B, which was from around 550 AD, off in the distance, and its ruins are quite impressive. We didn't make our way over there. I just took a picture from the distance because there was a whole bunch of stuff I wanted to see. But Basilica B is known for the preservation of its ruins. Its altar is intact and different things are intact back there. Next, walking along, is the octagonal basilica from around 400 AD. And it's known for its lovely floor mosaics, which they were taking great pains to protect and to restore. And if you can look at this one slide here, you can see my feet as I look down and take a picture, but you can also see on the wall mosaic some writing. And you can see the Greek there, and you can see Paul, or Paulos, the word for Paul. So this basilica was to honor the Apostle Paul and his influence upon Philippi. And of course we read from Acts that Philippi was the apostle who founded the church there. So you can see that those lovely floor mosaics. There's more slides to come. Here's another picture of the octagonal basilica floor mosaics, and see that lovely flower there. But you can see in this other slide that they have actually built a covering to preserve these floor mosaics from the weather as they're restoring them. It's quite lovely. This next one is a picture of the baptistry in this basilica, and you can see it's got this interesting shape. But this is a place where people were baptized, where Christians were baptized in the 400s in this church. So it's a beautiful picture. And then make our way from the actual ruins along towards the museum that was linked to this archaeological site. We see another basilica from the 6th century, and as you look down, you can see the ruins, but you can also see kind of the curved, semicircular shape at the front of the church in this other photograph. They had it fenced off. You couldn't go down and actually look at them, but you could stand up there on the hill and take a picture. And of course, this is one last look as we left for the day. That beautiful, archway going up into the ruins, and there we are walking away from the ruins. And you can see the theater in the background in that one picture. And finally, we're back on the bus. After our wonderful day of looking at the ruins, on our way back to Kavala, and you can see on the sign Kavala in Greek, the B, the beta sound, has a V sound, so it's Kabbalah. So we're making our way back to Kavala, and then jumping on another bus and going back to Thessaloniki. So all in all, it was a wonderful little trip that we took.